Cuban heavyweight contender Mike Perez scored a majority decision draw over 10 rounds against fellow heavyweight contender Carlos Takam of Cameroon. This was a strange fight, very, very strange fight. For the first few rounds, there was almost no action at all. Takam was on the back foot. Takam was the bigger man. Both guys were around the same height. Takam is slightly taller, about 1 or 2 inches taller. But Takam was a hell of a lot bigger. I think he was around 20 pounds, maybe more, 25 pounds bigger than Mike Perez. But he boxed on the back foot for the first few rounds. Perez was coming forward. Takam was very negative, very cagey. But neither man could really get off anything clean. But you would probably score the early rounds to Perez just for the fact that he was pressing the action, because there was very little to separate them. No one was landing any clean shots. But Takam was very negative. Then in about, I think, round 4 or 5, the fight completely turned around. It did a 180. And Takam all of a sudden started engaging in a slugfest. He started coming forward. He wasn't being reckless. He was keeping his defense tight, but he started unloading on Mike Perez. And, sorry, before that, I think it was in round 3. Was it in round 2 or 3? Mike Perez suffered a cut because of a clash of heads. So I'm not sure if Takam's team told him to step on the gas after the clash of heads, or whether it was more to do with a strategy they'd already come into the ring with. But nonetheless, Mike Perez suffered a serious cut because of a clash of heads in about round, I think it was round 2 or 3. But Takam didn't at that stage go into a slugfest. He didn't engage in a slugfest at that stage. He continued boxing cagely. It was a couple of rounds after the cut. That's when Takam really started going at Mike Perez. And Perez seemed a bit shell-shocked. You know, Takam is a big, strong, powerful guy. He started landing good body shots. He was putting a lot of pressure on Mike Perez. And Perez was clearly lacking in energy, lacking in strength. And he attempted, obviously, to fight Carlos Takam off, but he was pretty unsuccessful. Takam, after a couple of rounds of them slugging it out, it was clear that Takam had more energy. He was the stronger man, and he just seemed to be more motivated in there. Now, we know that Mike Perez was coming off his war, his brutal war with Magomed Abdusalamov, which tragically has left Abdusalamov with serious and perhaps permanent brain damage. So we don't know how that affected Mike Perez psychologically. And we also don't know how the fight itself that he had with Abdusalamov may have affected him physically, because it was a brutal fight. It's possible that he came back from that fight too early to take this fight with Carlos Takam, because it was such a brutal fight. Both guys took so many punches. Your body does need time, a lot of time, to recover from that kind of war. So maybe Mike Perez's body just wasn't fully recovered. And maybe mentally he wasn't fully recovered from the Abdusalamov fight, because he just wasn't the same guy in there. And I don't know how much of that was down to the cut, how much of it was down to Takam's work that he did in there, because Takam did do good work in there. He's a very big, strong guy, and he was landing good body shots on Mike Perez. And I wonder how much those body shots took out of him, because he was landing them with regularity towards the middle of the fight. And Perez is a very tough guy. He toughed it out, but he really looked spent. From about maybe round 7 or 8 onwards, Mike Perez looked like a completely spent force, and it was surprising that he managed to go the distance with such a big, powerful, aggressive guy. Mike Perez, yet again in this fight, as he did in the Abdusalamov fight, showed that he's got a very solid chin. But in my opinion, he was lucky to get a majority decision draw after 10 rounds. The impression I had was that Carlos Takam won that fight. Yes, he gave away the early rounds, but I thought he did enough work in probably the final 2/3 of the fight to take the fight from Mike Perez. You know, I thought Carlos Takam was unlucky to not get the decision there, you know. But, you know, that's boxing, man. That's boxing. And tell me how you scored the fight. Did you think that Perez won? Did you think that Takam won? Did you think that a draw was a fair decision? Like I say, I think a draw was pretty harsh on Takam. I thought he did enough to win the fight. But at the same time, I have to admit, Mike Perez did not seem like himself in there. That was not the same Mike Perez that fought Abdusalamov. It just was not. And again, I have to reiterate, I'm not sure if that was down to the tragedy, the psychological after effects of the Abdul Salamov fight, or the physical after effects of that fight, or how much of it was down to Takam's work rate, his strength, his body shots. I don't know. Maybe it was a combination of all of those things plus the cut. So it was just a bad night at the office for Mike Perez, but he at least is going to salvage a draw out of it, and he keeps his unbeaten record. So in the end, it turned out to be a fairly decent heavyweight fight, but you couldn't help feeling that this wasn't the real Mike Perez. So anyway, drop your comments below. Let me know how you felt about it if you watched it. This is Hatman, I'm out.